Welcome back to Social Impact Live, the show where I come on here daily to talk about what it takes to create real and lasting social change in the world. Today, I want to talk about Derek Chauvin, the killer of George Floyd, what George Floyd's death means and this conviction means, and then what it still means about the work that we need to do from here. So yesterday, George Floyd's killer, Derek Chauvin, was convicted of murder. He was found guilty of all 3 counts that he had been charged with in George Floyd's death. And as that realization settled in over me, as I heard the verdict, I was actually at a playground with my son. As I heard the verdict, though, it began to sink in, and I felt a wave of different emotions and thoughts wash over me. And I want to talk a little bit about what those thoughts are, but also talk about what they mean for where we go from here. So one of the first thoughts that I had whenever I heard the news was, finally someone, a police officer, someone who's been given incredible power in society, someone who's been given the literal right to take life, has been held responsible, accountable for their actions when they abuse that privilege, when they abuse that right, when it's found to be unsubstantiated. But there have been so many cases in the past where that has not been the case, where even when it's been caught on camera or it's been protested about, it's been raised in the consciousness of our national media, that we've still failed to prosecute those cases. Some of the examples from the past that come to mind were Rodney King, for example, Arthur McDuffie. These examples of individuals who were beaten or where the police were found to have fabricated evidence and were still let off. But we have so many others in recent years where justice was not served. So one of the first thoughts that came over me was, finally the system functioned the way that we would expect the system to function, that someone who took a life unjustly was held accountable for that. That was the first thought in some ways that hit me, but very quickly after that thought hit me, I had a feeling of hope as well. Maybe it was intertwined with that one, which was maybe this can be the tipping point, the catalyst for change that creates a system where my son, who, as I was listening to this verdict, I saw him, he was running around on the playground. My son can grow up in a world where if someone were to take his life, there would be accountability, where the forces who are meant to protect him the most are held accountable should they choose not to. And that was another thought that I had. But the biggest thought that came through was about the anomalous nature of this case. It is an anomaly that Derek Chauvin was convicted of murder for a number of reasons. One, it's an anomaly that he was even tried in the first place. The charges were even brought against him because of the relationship that prosecutors tend to have with police officers. In this case, it seemed maybe it was unavoidable. The video had already gotten out. It was leaking around. It was spreading in a way that the forces came together to make this a different situation than normal. But generally, charges are not brought against police officers when they commit crimes like this, when they kill others like this. Second, it was an anomaly because there was a crowd of people standing around Derek Chauvin as he pressed his knee into George Floyd's neck. There were videos captured additionally from different angles, right? Something that usually isn't happening. We usually have the grainy or the rapidly moving body cam footage from an officer, which is something we didn't even have several years ago, but we have now. Or we have, the security camera that's 30 feet away that's capturing something, and it's something that the defense uses to distort the information, right? To say that, well, we don't have enough information, so all we end up being able to go on is the word of the people who are still alive. We definitely have a system who favors those who are still living because the dead can't speak for themselves. But in this case, there was a crowd of witnesses surrounding George Floyd, which was an anomalous situation as well. Crowd of witnesses actually bringing this case to trial in the first place. People saying, hey, stop doing that and get off of him in the first place. Additionally, we had the chief of police testify in what I think may be an unprecedented move, something I haven't seen in any previous case. We had the chief of police testify against his own officer, saying that the practices that he was putting in place were not representative of the training that had been put there. and that had been put there, that had been implemented. They were not things that they would advocate for. And the cynic in me says that this was a bit of self-preservation, but the optimist in me says that that move was very powerful, was incredibly powerful in ensuring that this case would secure a conviction against Derek Chauvin as well. So I thought about the anomalous nature. But the last thing that I really thought about, and this is what I want to share here with you in particular, is the system that's still in place. You see, this case, this conviction under so much national spotlight, this is the outcome that I wanted, is still going to have an adverse effect. The adverse effect is that some people will look at this and they will say, look, our criminal justice system, our criminal legal system works well. Do you remember that case of George Floyd? We all thought it was wrong and his killer was convicted of murder. Bad cops should be thrown out of the force. And it will dull us, it will dull our senses to the reality of what really needs to happen, which is that this system that allowed for George Floyd's life to be taken so casually in the first place, for an officer to kneel on someone's neck who is saying, I can't breathe, who's already face down in the street, whose body is going more and more lifeless, more and more motionless throughout that time, for people to say, hey, get off of him, and for him to be able to completely and fully ignore that, with, I believe, the belief that there would be little accountability regardless of what happened in that situation. The system that allowed that casual act to happen in the first place is 100% still in place all across the country. The conversation wasn't about whether Derek Chauvin was truly responsible for the death of George Floyd. So much of the conversation centered on, was this police practice? Is this in the handbook? Is it not in the handbook? Versus, are you accountable for your actions when you take someone's life, and that person's life should never have been lost in the first place? Are you accountable? Are you responsible for the use of force that you apply toward other people, especially when they've applied no force back toward you? Right? That is not the conversation we were having, and it's the one that we need to be having. So that's on the sort of the policing side in the first place. But the other piece is that the system that allows police officers to not be charged, to not be prosecuted, to not end up in jail, convicted of the murder of the people that they end up harming, is also 100% still in place. Nothing in this case has dismantled the system that will allow an officer to escape accountability for their actions. It took the planetary alignment of these different factors that I already mentioned, from the crowd being present and the video being caught from different angles, and the police chief testifying, in order for this to actually make it to trial in the first place. And even with those factors, it's possible that the prosecutor may have never brought charges against that officer. So when I say this, I think about the context under which I heard this news as I was watching my son, again, play in a playground. And I was thinking about his life as he grows up as a black kid, becoming a black man in America as well. I realized that I have to speak about what we really need to be focused on. We need to be focused on ensuring we have a system of accountability. Not that we held a single officer accountable, but that we have a system that systematically, repeatedly, over and over and over again, functions to hold accountable the officers who have been given such great power over our society, in our society, that we hold them accountable for their actions when they err, when they take the life of other people whose lives should not be taken in any of those situations. And so to create that system, right, we need mechanisms that say, hey, you are going to be tried because you've taken this life either way. Right? We're going to look into this situation. We're going to separate out some of the buddy-buddiness that can exist between prosecutors and police officers, which keep them from bringing those charges in the first place. We are going to remove the conflict of interest that exists within this sphere. We are not going to allow police departments to investigate themselves. We're going to have others actually do that work, and we're going to make sure that those entities are so detached from one another that we actually have a legitimate balance of powers. That is, if we are going to have police officers in society, if we are going to have this role maintained the way that it's maintained right now, those are things that need to be put in place. Otherwise, the confidence in the system will continue to erode. Otherwise, we will remain locked in the cycle that we're locked in right now, which is that an officer kills an unarmed black person. That officer is generally not charged or is let go or put on probation for a little while. They are taken off the street for a little while. Protests ensue, riots ensue because nothing's being listened to in the first place. And then either files are charged and then the officer is found innocent, or files are never charged in the first place, and we end up back here over and over and over again. If we want to break this entire cycle, though, we need to do something different. We need to focus not on the individual actors, not on saying we got that one officer and we got that officer too, but saying we need a system that holds all officers accountable. Because here's the thing, if you happen to be someone who's on the side of saying, there are a few bad apples, but there's a lot of really good police officers out there, what you need to recognize is that the system we have now harms those good officers as well, because it places them into the category with all of these other bad actors. All it takes in this case is for one officer to do something wrong, for all of the officers to be seen in a negative light. And if we don't want that to maintain or to be maintained or to continue either, if that happens to be the position that you come from, then you should find that your struggle is actually intertwined with this one as well. We need a system of accountability that we can all rely on, that we can all believe in, that everyone trusts, in order to ensure that justice is served each time and that accountability exists through and through. That's what I've got for you today on Social Impact Live. If you happen to be working on one of these systems, if you happen to have your hands on the lever of power within one of these systems, I hope that you choose to pull it in the direction of creating system-level change, because the efforts to pursue individual justice are merited, but will not stop the next George Floyd from being killed. But those who have their hands on these systems of power, and those who are watching who don't have their hands on those systems, but who have a vote, who have the ability to educate themselves, who have the ability to advocate on behalf of policies that create more accountability, who have the ability to hold their elected officials accountable, all of us have an opportunity to create the future that is actually going to be just for all of us. All right. I'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Social Impact Live. I will see you then.